Okay, so let's travel back to 1910. The world was absolutely captivated by this story about a guy named Dr. Holly Harvey Crippen. He seemed like this mild-mannered homeopath, but the story was that he was actually a brutal killer. And his capture? It was a total sensation, a real triumph for this brand new cutting-edge tech called the wireless telegram. For about 100 years, everyone thought, case closed, a perfect textbook example of justice being served. But, as you're about to find out, the story was, well, it was far from over.
So here's the big question, the one that completely flips this classic true crime story on its head. He was caught by what was then the technology of the future. But what happens when the science of our future, of today, takes a second look? I mean, the tech that put him away looks almost ancient compared to modern forensics. So what happens when you apply today's science to one of yesterday's most famous crimes? Well, let's just say the answer changes absolutely everything.
All right, let's dive in. Our story really kicks off in Edwardian London, around 1910. We're at a house, 39 Hilldrop Crescent, that looks pretty ordinary from the outside. But inside, it's about to become the stage for a crazy story of secrets, lies, and yeah, murder.
So, let's meet the main players. First, you've got Dr. Holly Crippen, an American homeopath, and his wife, Cora. She was a music hall singer who went by the stage name Belle Elmore. Now, their marriage was, let's just say, not great. It was pretty rocky, lots of affairs on both sides. And then there's Ethel Lenave. She was Dr. Crippen's young, quiet typist, but by 1908, she was also his mistress. Yep, we've got a classic and very dangerous love triangle on our hands.
Okay, so it all kicks off on January 31st, 1910. The Crippens throw a party at their house, and right after that, Cora just vanishes. Poof, gone. And Dr. Crippen, his story keeps changing. First, he tells people she went back to the US. Then, a little later, he says, oh, actually, she died over there. Things get even more suspicious when his mistress, Ethel, moves right into the house and starts wearing Cora's clothes and jewelry. Yikes. So when Cora's friends get the police involved and they question Crippen, he changes his story again, saying she just up and left him for another man. You can just feel this whole web of lies starting to fall apart.
And here's the crazy part. The police inspector, he actually kind of bought Crippen's last story. He was pretty much ready to drop it, but Crippen didn't know that. He completely panicked. He and Ethel just grabbed their stuff and fled London. And that single move, that one act of pure panic, turned what was just a routine inquiry into a massive international manhunt. I mean, running away like that, it basically screamed, I'm guilty.
So, because they ran, Crippen's escape set off this incredible chase across the Atlantic Ocean. It was a chase that would literally make history, and it was all thanks to this amazing new piece of technology, the wireless telegraph.
So picture this. The couple gets to Antwerp, in Belgium, and they book passage on a ship called the SS Montrose, headed for Canada. They figure they're starting a new life. To disguise themselves, Dr. Crippen shaves off his big, signature mustache, and Ethel cuts her hair short and dresses up like his young son. You have to imagine, they probably thought they were home free, just two faces lost in a crowd of passengers on a long ocean voyage.
But there was one person they didn't count on, the ship's captain, a man named Henry George Kendall. Now, he'd been reading the newspapers about the case, and this very conspicuous father and son pair caught his eye. He saw right through their disguises and sent this absolutely historic message. It read, have strong suspicions that Crippen, London cellar murderer and accomplice, are among saloon passengers. Mustache taken off, growing beard. Accomplice dressed as boy. Manner and build undoubtedly a girl. Just like that, thanks to this new wireless technology, the whole world was tuned in. That telegram was the game changer. It gave Scotland Yard the head start it desperately needed. Chief Inspector Walter Dew immediately jumped on a faster ship, the SS Laurentic, and it became this incredible race across the Atlantic. And guess what? Dew won. He got to Canada first. So he boards the Montrose, disguised as a harbor pilot, walks right up to his man, and just says, "Good morning, Dr. Crippen." And Crippen's response tells you everything. He just said, "Thank God it's over. The pressure, the running, it had all been too much."
Okay, so the fugitives are caught, and the case heads to the famous Old Bailey courthouse. But you have to ask, what evidence did the police actually have to prove murder? Well, while Crippen and Lee Neve were out on the ocean, investigators back at Hilldrop Crescent had kept searching. And in the coal cellar, under the floor, they made a truly gruesome discovery, a human torso.
So, one of the biggest pieces of evidence against him was the poison.
See, Crippen, being a homeopath, had bought a large amount of a very toxic, very specific drug called hyoscine hydrobromide just before Cora disappeared. And when the famous pathologist Bernard Spilsbury examined the human remains from the cellar, he found traces of that exact same poison. It felt like a smoking gun, a direct link connecting Crippen, the murder weapon, and the body.
The trial itself really hinged on three main pieces of evidence. First, you have the torso. The prosecution's argument was simple: it had to be Cora. The defense, though, suggested, hey, maybe it was from a previous tenant. Then there was this piece of skin. The prosecution said, look, it has a scar that matches one Cora had, but the defense had a great counter-argument. It can't be a scar because it has hair follicles growing out of it. And finally, there was a fragment of a pajama top found with the body that seemed to match a pair of bottoms found in Crippen's bedroom. It was a pretty compelling case for sure, even if a lot of it was circumstantial.
So for the jury, the public, and really the entire justice system back in 1910, all that evidence was more than enough. The whole thing moved really quickly towards what felt like a totally inevitable and dramatic ending.
27 minutes. Just think about that. That's all the time the jury took to decide the man's fate. In less than a half an hour, they came back with a unanimous verdict: guilty. For them, there wasn't a shadow of a doubt. Dr. Crippen was a murderer.
And so, on November 23rd, 1910, Dr. Crippen was hanged. His lover, Ethel Lenave, was actually acquitted of all charges and just sort of faded away into history. It seemed like a sensational crime had met a very swift, very certain end. The case was officially closed, sealed up, and written into the history books. Or, so everyone thought. Okay, so now fast forward. For almost a full century, that was the end of the story. The case was closed. But then modern science stepped in and gave this old tale one final, absolutely shocking twist. And just like that, the entire investigation was blown wide open again.
I mean, the difference really is just technology. Think about it. In 1910, forensics was all about what you could see with your own eyes, maybe some early toxicology. But today, we can analyze the literal building blocks of life itself. We've got things like mitochondrial DNA, or mtDNA, which is incredible because it's passed down from mother to child, letting us trace a family's maternal line across generations. And of course, we have Y chromosome testing that can tell us with 100% certainty if remains are male or female.
And here's the amazing part. You're not going to believe this. A tiny piece of the original evidence from 1910 still existed. It was a microscope slide with a sample of the torso tissue, and it had been carefully preserved for almost 100 years. In 2007, a team of forensic scientists at Michigan State University got a hold of this slide, this tiny fragment of the past, and they decided to see what modern DNA analysis could tell them. And the results were, well, they were stunning, just jaw-dropping. First, the scientists tracked down Cora Crippen's living relatives. They tested the mitochondrial DNA from that century-old slide against theirs. The result? No match. It was not Cora Crippen in that cellar. But wait, it gets even crazier. The next finding was the real bombshell. The Y chromosome test came back positive. The remains were from a male. And then, the final nail in the coffin of the old verdict. They looked at that scar tissue and confirmed what the defense had argued all the way back in 1910. It had hair follicles. It wasn't a scar at all. Every single major piece of physical evidence used to convict Dr. Crippen was completely wrong. And this brings us back to something Crippen himself wrote in a letter right before he was executed. He said, "Face to face with God, I believe that facts will be forthcoming to prove my innocence." At the time, I'm sure everyone just dismissed that as the desperate last words of a guilty man. But now, with what we know from 21st century science, those words sound chillingly prophetic, don't they?
So that leaves us with some massive unanswered questions. If the body in the cellar wasn't Cora, then who was it? Who was this man buried under the floor? And what really happened to Cora Crippen? Is it possible she just ran off with another man, exactly like her husband claimed? Science seems to prove Dr. Crippen innocent of the specific crime he was hanged for, but in doing that, it's turned one of history's most famous solved cases into a deep, unsettling mystery. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other truths from history are just one DNA test away from being completely turned on their head?